The Legend of Korra was tasked with following up on the almost transcendent success of The Last Airbender. That series was very well written and had a very satisfying ending. The Legend of Korra was a show that didn't have to exist, but the authors took the risk and made the show anyways. I've never really talked about my opinion of Korra as a series, only vague statements that people interpret as positive or negative. So I'll just say it out here for the record that I think it's a solid show all things considered, and I think that it's worth celebrating now that it's 10 years old. For the 10-year anniversary, I was asked along with some other Avatar creators to make a video discussing one scene from the show. One legendary scene. I chose to do Zahir entering the void, which ends up just being a Zahir analysis. Let's get into it. Many years ago when Korra was a child, Zahir, Unalaq, and other members of the Red Lotus attempted to kidnap Korra to indoctrinate her into their ways. Zahir's band failed and were sent to prison for 13 years. During Harmonic Convergence, however, Zahir and many other people gained the ability to airbend. Zahir stood out as someone who was special among them, someone who was particularly skilled. And this is partly because he was a martial artist beforehand. As we could see, he was under extreme lockdown similar to his other members, despite the fact that he didn't have any bending, implying he was already a serious threat before he gained the ability to airbend. But of course, what's more important to mention is that he was an astute student of Guru Lahima. He already shared a lot of his core philosophies, and Guru Lahima was one of the greatest airbenders of all time. So he already had that free spirit characteristic of airbenders. I think it's also important to note that it's theorized that he was probably an airbending acolyte. The airbending acolytes are a group of people who uphold the airbending traditions. One of the main themes that permeates throughout the entire Avatar story is legends, for a lack of a better word. It's that these figures of the past are people to be admired. Aang and his traditions with the air nomads, Roku imparting wisdom onto Aang and Tenzin, etc. But there always seems to be some key problem with all these old figures that bogs them down from just being deities and bringing them back to the level of a human. Roku wasn't decisive enough and allowed his friend to start a war. Aang wasn't a good father, and I talked about this a lot in my Tenzin video. What ends up happening so often is that people end up being blinded to the past and are unable to look into the future. Zahir's mentor of sorts was Guru Lahima. He has problems too, of course, but what's interesting is that he actually espoused views that seem to go against tradition. This was made evident in probably his most important quote: "New growth cannot come without the destruction of the old." It's through this ideology that Zahir was able to lead his anarchist group within the Red Lotus. Zahir shows the opposite side of Tenzin, who is far too beholden to tradition. Only half of bending is your physical prowess. The other half is your psychological and philosophical nature. Earthbenders need to philosophically and psychologically stand their ground, waterbenders are the ones who are adapting, etc. From a young age, Zahir understood the airbending philosophy of freedom very well. But he didn't grow up around monks, and I think that this gave him a very different understanding of freedom. If we just look at Lahima's quote, it may seem innocent enough. We don't know the context in which he stated it. It could have just been a personal philosophy, and on a personal level, it perhaps means that in order to change, one must look inward at themselves and destroy all the bad things about them, which I think is a fair quote. But Zahir takes to it in another way, applying it not only to himself but to society at large. And this was of course due to the anarchist nature of the Red Lotus. He believes that society itself needs a change and uses Guru Lahima as inspiration. So, we've established that Zahir had a freedom philosophy and a freedom-based mind. I believe that this is what most clearly separated him from Tenzin. Tenzin was all about order and tradition, whereas Zahir actively tried to destroy all of that. It's this obsession with rules and traditions that I believe made Tenzin unable to enter the spirit world or unlock unassisted flight. Tenzin limited himself to his strict discipline and teachings. To command the power of flight, one must let go of such ideas. Tenzin was too bogged down by rules and principles rather than his own insights to enter the spirit world. Now, it's important to note that the show doesn't paint Zahir as being completely right. Zahir believes that when establishments are torn down, the world will fall into its natural order. Is this a correct philosophy, or is Tenzin's emphasis on order actually correct? To some extent, they're both right. Order and traditions are important, but ought not be the limiting factor. Freedom is important, but shouldn't be the end in and of itself. Change for change's sake is nonsense. G.K. Chesterton, the Christian philosopher, said, "Don't take down a fence until you know the reason it was up." Zahir doesn't seem to have a very nuanced understanding of what he's trying to do. He sees what the Earth Queen has done, and yeah, sure, that's a bad authority, but a completely orderless society just ends up leaving a power vacuum and causes a lot of problems later on. It's also rather juvenile to have your entire ideology based on what is natural. I question whether complete disorder is even natural, but even if we pretend that it is, it doesn't make any declaration of if it's good or not. And bringing it back to the video, on a personal level, complete freedom isn't good. Some tethers are needed, some tethers are good. To attain flight, Zahir needed 3 things. First, a detachment from earthly desires, a tetherless, free mind, both philosophically and psychologically. And second, of course, you need airbending. Zahir's mind was philosophically free, but he still had some psychological tethers, most notably Pali. And then once she's killed, he's able to live completely free. He's entered a complete void. He's weightless, he moves wherever the wind takes him. He's completely free. A nirvana state where he has no earthly desires. This isn't to say that he didn't have any desires, it's just his desires were no longer earthly. He isn't doing anything for anyone. He only lives for the establishment of untethered freedom. This has become his entire life purpose. His desire to enact his goal has now transcended beyond the mortal realm. It's not merely a human desire, it's a spiritual desire. He's the only airbender with this free, tetherless mind. Tenzin was tethered to traditions and family. Gyatso was unable to let go of his fatherly attachment to Aang. Aang explicitly holds on to Katara when trying to control the Avatar state. And even then, he's thought a duty to serve the people as the Avatar. He's the bridge between the real world and the spiritual world. So he has to still be tethered to this world. Romance, family, duty to his people, those are all earthly attachments. This isn't to say that Zahir forgot all about this, it's to say that he lost attachment to all of them. He doesn't care either way. Instead of feeling sorrow, grief, or anger at Pali's death, he felt nothing. Those reactions are what your instinct tells you. But instinct is a lie,
told by a fearful body, hoping to be wrong.
To be clear, I don't think any of this is a good thing, but it certainly is a powerful thing. Only him and Guru Lahima have been able to do this, and Lahima did it 4,000 years ago, making flight most likely the rarest ability in the series. You quite literally have to give up everything for flight. We all understand how he was attached to Pali, but you have to understand he also had friends within the Red Lotus that were still alive in Ghazan and Minghua. They die and he doesn't even acknowledge their existence. Even after they died, he was still able to fly. This just shows how dedicated Zahir was to his ultimate goal, establishing once again that he was literally able to give it all up just to achieve it. And I don't think the show portrays this in a particularly bright light. Zahir may be able to soar, but it's quite lonely being up there all alone. But alas, it needs to get done. What I also find interesting is that he's willing to help Korra take down Kuvira because in some way it would help him achieve his goal. He should still bear some sort of resentment to Korra, but he really doesn't. Sure, in an ideal world, Korra would be gone, but he's so focused, has such a one-track mind on his goal, that he's able to quickly understand that defeating Kuvira is the most important thing right now. To finish us all off, at the end of Book 3, Tenzin does acknowledge that some things need to be changed and he does give his children more freedom. But he doesn't desecrate everything of the past. He understands why some things were there. I talked about the problems with the legendary figures before, but I never mentioned the problem with Guru Lahima. The problem with Zahir's mentor is that he was too detached. His entire philosophy was based on changing things, changing everything, even things that didn't need to be changed. Zahir entering the void, this metaphorical space where you're all alone, isn't really a good thing. I think it's similar to bloodbending in that it's a very powerful ability, but it's psychologically damaging. It shows a side of Avatar where if you take your bending to some extreme, you can do some pretty crazy things. All in all, it's this mystical philosophy and iron conviction, as well as this cool demeanor and big brain tactics that makes Zahir one of the most intriguing villains, not only in Korra, but in the entire Avatar franchise. Tell me what your favorite scene of Korra is, and make sure you check out the other videos in the playlist. Shoutouts to Antoine Bendelay for setting this all up. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. This was really cool and really fun to look at all the old scenes in Korra. And yeah, thank you for watching. A like, comment, and a sub would be very much appreciated. Alright, peace.